Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Today, I'm joined by Christian Muntean, advisor to executives, founder of Vantage Consulting, and author of Train to Lead. Now, Christian helps business owners grow their companies by hundreds of millions of dollars while reclaiming their time and focus. Now, in this conversation, we discuss why leadership should be trained just like athletic performance, built through deliberate practice, repetition, and discipline. If you've ever wondered how to train yourself to be a better leader, this episode is for you. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started. Today, I'm joined by Christian Muntean. Christian is an advisor to owners, executives, and boards. He is the founder of Vantage Consulting, where he empowers owners and executives of small and medium sized businesses to boost their top line revenues by over $500 million. Even more valuable, they've achieved this while expanding their bottom line margins and reclaiming precious time for their loved ones and their passions. He is the author of Train to Lead, which is a tested and proven 90-day leadership development guide built on athletic training principles. And I'm excited to have him on the show to learn more from his expertise. So, Christian, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, John. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you on the show. Good to meet you. I think you might be our first guest that I'm talking to from Alaska. So,
There we go.
in
All
nearly
right.
400 episodes, I don't think we've had anyone from Alaska. So, it's great to have
Nice
you on
to
the
own that
show.
space.
Yeah, you're number one. So, I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So let's get into like the book you've written. It's called Train to Lead, and what inspired you to write this now, and what's unique about the approach in this book?
Yeah. So this is my third book, and this was the one that took the longest to write. It was, I think, similar to our conversation before we started the show. I have a different background, but a similar passion or a heart to try to help leaders be good leaders. And and so this book probably took me about 12 or 15 years to actually
Oh,
write
wow.
because I just felt like I needed to kind of marinate on the concepts and the framing, and I wanted to test it, but I wanted something that was actually impactful. The short version is, as you know, uh, leadership development, leadership concepts, that's a very well-traveled trail. It's been talked about, written about for forever. And but as you've probably experienced, I'm making assumptions here, most leadership development trainings, and I've been through an enormous amount of them, and have an academic background in leadership, um, almost all of it is kind of a fire hose approach of here's a whole bunch of good ideas. We hope something sticks, don't screw up. And
Yeah.
that's the typical promotion path as well. And people get technical training in whatever their field is. But when it comes to actually how do you lead people, there's a lot of just, we hope this works. And I felt like it didn't have to be that way. So part of my background is also in athletics. And for a while, I was a strength and conditioning instructor for about 12 years, kind of as a side hobby that I was doing. And I started to wonder, why is it with athletics where you can take an athlete and train them to the day to perform? So months out, 3 months out, 6 months out, I can take an athlete and build a training regimen that will have them peak out right before they need it, the day that they need it. But with leadership, it's this very hit and miss approach. It's
Mm.
all kind of scattered. And I thought, why is it this way? And I just began to wonder, as sort of a thought experiment, what if we apply some of the same basic concepts for developing an athletic training regimen and just play with those principles and see if there's carryover to the leadership world and see if that actually works. And as I thought about it and played with it, I realized there was enormous crossover,
Mm.
and that if you follow that structure, you actually predictably get results in terms of leadership growth and leadership capacity. And so that is my hope in terms of a contribution to the leadership field with this book, is not so much to introduce, I think there may be some new or differently framed concepts in the book, but really it's more of how to approach these concepts and integrate them into your life to make it, in the fitness world, in the nutrition world, there's a concept called bioavailability. So if you take supplements, I mean, a lot of them just pass straight through your body. They're, really expensive pee. And, but so they're not bioavailable. Your body's not able to absorb them. And I thought a lot of leadership concepts, a lot of leadership training's not bioavailable as well. It kind of passes straight through. You forget about it. And so I built this book or the concept that's in the book to make leadership concepts bioavailable, where you can absorb them, you can integrate them into your practice. You don't have to leave your practice to practice these things. You don't have to go away to a leadership training. You can just work on them as you lead. So I built it and it's structured as a self-coaching guide. So I think it's always better to have a coach, but it's designed after, kind of similar to a lot of fitness books, where it shows you, here's how to do the exercise. Now go do the exercise. Now come back and let's do the next one. So it's kind of structured that way.
Yeah. It's interesting. I really like that approach. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have in the show. Cause I, as a weightlifter myself, sort of
Okay.
like, you know, it takes reps, right? It takes a lot of
Yep.
time to build strength, and as you
Right.
mentioned, if you're competing, for example, you're working up to a meet, and so
Yeah.
you want to peak right there at the meet. But one of the things that's interesting, when I think about comparing leadership training and also strength training, is sort of you get, the more reps you do, the more it becomes automatic. In other words, you have
Right.
you have muscle memory, right? To
Exactly. Yeah.
where your position, where you put your hands on the bar, your position of your body, all that is sort of muscle memory if you do it over and over again. I would imagine similar
Right.
to this, as you do these exercises and you get used to doing it. So when the real thing hits and you run into the real leadership situation, you've already done the work, and so you have like this muscle memory that takes over when that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah. And I think for specific areas, like if you're dealing with conflict, if you're dealing with a crisis, when you're dealing with anything that's kind of emotional,
Mm.
just the way our brains operate, we tend to stop using the executive functioning part of our brain, and we slip back into kind of this reactive part of our brain, a survival part of it. And if you've built muscle memory, you are more likely to revert to your training as
Mm.
opposed to just what the emotional basis is. And so if you've been practicing, well, here's how I handle difficult conversations and ones that are less threatening, then when you get to one where you feel threatened, you're more likely to revert back to the habit which you've built. Other than what's that concept that I'm supposed to remember from that
Right,
conflict resolution book that I read?
right.
And so, yeah, I think that is true. You do tend to revert back to, well, I mean, you revert to your training.
Yeah, yeah. Well, certainly my time in the military was that way. We trained so often and so frequently, and with the same people over and over again, that we knew exactly where to go and what to happen when any situation happened, because we had done it so much and so often. And
Right.
it's the one thing I feel like when I came into the civilian world, in the business world, is that we don't do any of that. Like we don't practice anything. We just sort of like
Yep.
figure things out as we go, instead of
Right.
actually thinking about scenarios, practicing it, and being ready for it. I think
Yeah.
we tend to just take it as it comes. And so I
Yeah.
think leaders end up having a lot on their shoulders to deal with change, to deal with uncertainty, to deal with market conditions. I mean, we all went through the pandemic, and now we have political things happening in the world where the tariffs and things like that, which are all
Sure.
affecting us. And so we haven't really practiced. We don't really,
Yeah.
we're facing all these things alone. So I like the idea that you've done some reps, and so you have you know what to do in certain circumstances because you've
Right.
had a chance to practice it. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Exactly. And it's not just reps. It's what you're doing reps on. So
Hmm.
because it sounds like you have an athletic background, a weightlifting background, when you're training competitively, and this is how almost all trainers work, or coaches, they use a concept called periodization. And I don't want to nerd out too much, but Basically, the idea is that there's a sequential order of training of things that you focus on for a short period of time, and then you move off of it into something else. And so, for example, you start out with conditioning. So if you're weightlifting, for example, and you move to a different kind of a lift. So if you've been mostly practicing with a power lift, and now you want to throw an Olympic lift into your mix. So for listeners that aren't familiar, they're both hard. Olympic lifts tend to be more explosive and sometimes more technically complicated in some ways. And so if you're going to do that switch, even though it may seem similar to what you've been doing, it is different for your body. And if you try to do it at the same weights that you've been doing it before, you set yourself up for injury or for a longer period of soreness or something like that. So the idea is you start out with conditioning, or the way the book's structured is actually before any of that. You start out with your environment, nutrition. Are you sleeping well? Are you eating well? What are corollaries from that to leadership? And then how do you condition yourself, which is really preparing yourself for stress.
Mm.
And the concept of that is there's several aspects of just self-management. How do you manage yourself well so that you can handle other people and handle your teams and your environment well? Then you get into the basis of any kind of fitness, which is strength. That's the foundation that you have. Even if you're a runner, if you're weak, then you're going to endure being weak for a very long time. You're not going to be a strong runner.
Right.
You layer on strength, which is power. And the way I define power is the ability to access your strength quickly. And so it's not about having like domination over other people. It's the ability to act decisively and to either create momentum and motion or to change the direction of things, like in a crisis or in a conflict, for example, or leading change. And then from that, how do you endure? How do you stay in it for the long time? And that cycle is how most very complete training patterns are built. And you typically, as an athlete, will spend a few weeks in each of those, maybe up to 6 weeks, and then you move on to the next. And then you cycle through. And the idea being is you can't train everything all at once. You just can't handle it. So you do this focus, and that seems to produce the best growth. And it's the same for leaders. So the idea is you never actually, it's not that like going to, and this is my encouragement, whether they use my program or any leadership development program out there, you don't go through a leadership development program, get your certificate at the end, and now you can do the stuff.
Yeah.
Because leadership is so emotional, it's so relational, it's so about your identity, it's about all this squishy stuff that just having an intellectual framework isn't enough for you to be able to put it into practice. You have to actually, as we were saying at the beginning, put in reps around it, figure out how to integrate these things. So that's the concept in the book, is how to do that, how to practice these things, how to practice them even if you're not in a situation that drives the need for what you're practicing, for exactly what you're saying, so that when the need is there, you've already been doing it and you're ready, and this isn't new for you.
I love it. I love it. One of the things you mentioned is and I see it as a big problem, is we sort of promote people into leadership positions often with very little training and very little development. And so that usually comes later, like after you've been a leader for, 3-4 years, right? It's like, oh, they're going to send you to some sheep dip training and you're going to be, qualified or whatever. But what are some of the unique challenges maybe that new leaders face? And what are some of the ways that you sort of address that in the book?
Yeah, well, what level of leadership would you be referring to? Like somebody's brand new to leadership at all, or someone
I
that's
think there's
brand new to like an executive level? Or
two different scenarios. One is maybe new to leadership, so just individual contributor gets promoted,
yeah,
and then maybe new to, like, you come into a new organization. So I faced the situation many times in
okay,
my career where I'm the new leader showing up to take over a manufacturing plant,
yeah,
and you don't know anybody, and so you're
right,
walking in sort of fresh. You might be an experienced leader in a new situation.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Well, that's great. My second book was about the walking into a new situation as an executive leader. But
yeah.
I would say one of the common challenges is very, fluffy bunny-ish, but it's super, super important, which is questions about identity.
Mm,
And so if you're not very clear and confident and anchored in who you are, then you're going to react in ways that you can't control, that won't always be positive or constructive. Or you'll underreact when a stronger decision or decisiveness was needed. And so I think this idea of really understanding who you are and how you fit within and how you serve the environment that you're in and the team that you're in and the value that you're bringing, that's important to look at, to examine, and to make sure that um, it's what you want it to be. Then the other part of it has to do with, I mean, it's this perspective thing. How I see, the way I frame it in the book is how I see myself, how I see others, and how I see life. And so the way I see myself, the way I see other people around me, there's enormous amount of studies that I go into in the book that describe how the relationships that we have and the way that we view them actually impacts, we're impacted by those relationships, but also just my perspective, even if I don't communicate it, about how I see other people, not only impacts the quality of that relationship, but it impacts their behavior
Mm.
in pretty interesting ways. And it's very well established research, replicated over and over again. And so that becomes really important as a leader. So if somebody comes in and they're afraid that they're going to be judged by their team, that's going to have an impact. That's how I see other people, and then that's going to have an impact on how I lead. Or if I think they're all idiots and why can't they get their stuff together, or whatever the thing is that I have in my head, um, it matters. Or if I see them as people of potential, maybe they're not 100%. Like right now, most of the workforce, I think everybody's wrestling with this, tends to be less experienced, less qualified, and less trained than what you might be able to expect for the same positions 15 years ago or even 10 years ago. And so I think many more experienced leaders feel a frustration about this. But if my shift is, this is an opportunity for me to mentor and grow,
Yeah.
as opposed to why don't they get it already, then I think that reframing becomes really important. But you have to be aware of it and make the framing. Then the other one's my perspective about life. Do I see life as a place of potential, or do I see it as a place of threat? Do I see this as an opportunity for myself and my company to grow, or are we just trying to hang on and survive? There's a lot of directions you can take that. But I think those are the main things for a new leader, which isn't the same thing as a leadership skill. But I think if the way you see is confident in a healthy way, not in an arrogant way, but you're grounded. I think that if you see yourself as someone who is valuable and brings value to others, and you're focused on that, if you believe that people have potential and that potential can be grown and tapped into, if you believe that the world is a place where you can identify and pursue opportunity and make things happen, I think all of that is the raw material that allows leadership success to be possible.
I really like that. It's interesting because I think if you kind of go into it where, maybe you're not confident in yourself, maybe you feel you've been, that you feel you've been undervalued throughout your career, that you feel like little guy never gets ahead. So if you have all those
Yeah.
three things, and when you're sort of like in a victim sort of mentality, right, you're going to be
Right.
acting a lot different than if you're coming to these things with, as you're saying, sort of like a positive perspective on each of these three areas. It sort of
Yeah.
gets you in a grounded position. And I think our people can see it, right? If you're
Oh yeah.
hesitant or you're fearful or you're sarcastic and negative or whatever,
Yeah.
because of these perceptions, right? I think our employees see that and they pick up on it, right? And so,
Oh, it's
yeah.
that is so powerful that I can um, learn about executive leadership in a company by talking to frontline teams.
Hmm.
If I start to see patterns in behavior, let's say I'm working with 3 or 4 different frontline teams, and they all exhibit tendencies to avoid conflict and to not hold each other accountable. Um, Wherever they share the most senior leadership that they all share, almost certainly will have those traits.
Hmm.
And so it becomes for me, it's a diagnostic tool. You start to look at these themes, or on the flip side of it, if they are confident and they deal with things well and they handle customer feedback well, and there's an empowered sense around them, then you're going to see traits that would either create that or enable that, at the most common shared leadership point at the highest level that they have. And so it's not just an individual picks up on this from you and either likes it or doesn't like it. It actually shapes the culture in your whole sphere of influence.
Oh, that's pretty important. Yeah,
Without, sorry for,
yeah,
without you trying to
yeah,
or wanting to, people just change and they adapt to it. It's kind of like parenting kids. Like, you
yeah.
don't know what they're going to pick up, but they're going to pick up something. If you're not putting good stuff out there, they're going to pick up on that.
Yeah, this is really an important point. I'm really glad you brought that up. Is that we often think that culture is something that we purposely that we maybe we think about it and we say this is the culture we want and we try to drive that into our organizations. But really, it's going to be the actions we take every day, our behaviors
Yeah.
every day, the things that we don't intend to have happen. Similar to a child watching their parents, right? They're going to
Yeah.
our employees are going to pick that up and naturally it's almost reflect our own views of the business, views of
Yeah.
the situation. So their culture sort of really reflects the leaders sort of behaviors and their approach
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
problems. So they're going to pick that up. So that's really interesting. So despite you saying, all right, we're going to in our company we're going to be punctual all the time and we're never going to do this, that, and the other thing, it's really your behaviors are going to be the ones that
Yeah.
really become the culture, become
Yeah,
the
it's the
norm.
behaviors and the attitudes that people really pick up on. I mean, everybody's been in a company that has its value statements that they tell you about,
Yeah,
and you quickly, it's one of the, whether people are thinking about it on purpose or are just doing it accidentally, a new employee into a company is paying attention to how is it actually done here versus
mm,
what people say. And when there's a disparity between what we say and what we actually practice, people pick up on that. And and so you have to be careful about that because you lose credibility when there's that disparity. But also, um, people pay more attention to what's done, not what's said.
yeah, yeah. Just like our kids. Yeah, they're going to watch
Yep.
exactly what is done, not what. Yeah, exactly. I love that. So one of the things you say is that leaders can integrate these train to lead sort of principles into their daily routine. And I sort of, when I was thinking about that, is like thinking about weightlifting. It's like sort of a daily routine, or if you
Yep.
have some sort of training regimen, it's a daily thing. What are some of these principles that we can integrate in our daily routine from the book?
Yeah, so some, I mean, each, there's about, I can't remember off the top of my head, 22, 23 chapters in the book, and each one has, or most of them have, a concept that I'm teaching. So for example, when it comes to my perspective on others, and so one of the exercises in there is to sit down and to pick somebody that you have a hard time with,
Hmm.
and to write down, I think I say 10 things maybe that you that are admirable or that you're grateful for about that person. And every day for the next couple of weeks, add one new thing to that list.
Hmm.
Read the old list and then add one new thing. And just be honest with everything that you write. So even if it's simple, their breath isn't bad today. That's my thing. Whatever the thing is. And so as you do that, what you're doing is it seems maybe goofy, it maybe seems simple, but what does happen is it starts to shift how you see that person. And then as you force yourself to shift how you see that person, you will relate to them differently, and then they will relate to you differently. And so it's not, this is human behavior, so it's not mechanical. It's not guaranteed. Not even mechanical stuff is guaranteed, but it's not guaranteed. But it begins. I practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and so there's nothing that we do in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that's guaranteed to work.
Hmm.
But there's things that have a higher likelihood of working and things that have a lower likelihood of
That
working.
makes
And
sense. Yeah.
when you're fighting somebody, you're trying to create the conditions that will improve the likelihood of the move or the escape or the sweep that you're trying to do. That will improve the likelihood of success. And it's that same concept. If you want to change your dynamic with somebody, that exercise takes very little time, and it starts to change the likelihood of you turning that relationship around and having a more productive, more successful relationship with that individual. So that's an example of one of the
Yeah. Yeah.
exercises.
No, I love that. I love the idea. Just that concept alone is, I think really powerful in terms of, because I think we do have some hangups. We have, whether we like it or not, we have enemies within our organization, people we can't stand being
Sure.
around, or maybe they've done something to hurt us, or they have,
Yep.
or we don't, or they broke our trust somewhere along the line, or they did
Yep.
something, that goes against our own principles. And so we can, one thing about life on a submarine, I was a submarine officer in my early days, is that, you couldn't escape another person that you're having a conflict with. So
Right.
one of the things we learned was to sort of work out differences. So, because you couldn't avoid somebody in
Right.
business, sometimes you can avoid people, right? And avoid having
Yep.
that interaction sort of. But I think this idea is really good. If you want to sort of work out some of the challenges, a lot of it is on your side, like
Yep.
mentally, sort of, like, I think this it'll give you a different perspective on an individual versus that one thing that hurts you, or the one thing that that
Yeah.
he or she did to you. I think there's sort of a reset. It's a way to sort of reset that. And then, because I think we can't have, if we're going to be, I mean, the truth of the matter is, if we're going to be successful in our businesses as leaders, right, we have to be able to work with people, to, even if we don't like them, even if we have
Right.
a problem with them in the past. So I think
Yep.
this idea is I can see as being very valuable. And so in
Yeah.
the principle of this, like, so this is just one concept we talked about, but the principle of like doing something on a regular basis, on a daily basis, to work something out, I think is a really good idea. It's very much like physical fitness training. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's and I do a lot of executive coaching, and everyone's busy. Everyone has too much time, or not enough
Yeah.
time to do things, I should say. And so I designed most of the exercises to be more dovetailed into your day, not to
Yeah.
take an hour of time away to work on it, but things that you could just fit in to how you regularly practice. I mean, one of the core concepts in the book, it's the same thing with training, right? So you know this from athletics. A lot of people say, "Oh, I wish I was in shape like you." It's like, well, you can be,
Mm.
assuming there's not an injury or something like that. It's just not going to happen right now, depending on your
Right.
starting point. But
Yeah.
you keep working out a little bit, you keep bringing in a couple of basic habits, and in a year from now, you're going to be in a different kind of shape than you are right now.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with leadership. And really, I'm trying to introduce, there's these academic terms called, locus of control or self-efficacy, which is the belief that I can do something and make things happen.
Yeah.
And leaders have to have that. They have to believe that I act and I can change the results in the world around me. Within a healthy way of believing that. And but there needs to be handles on it. And so most people are raised with the belief that life happens to them, and they
Mm.
just try to survive it.
Yeah.
And then when they get promoted into management or leadership, and that's their perspective, then the kind of leadership or management that they provide becomes very reactive and unhelpful.
Mm-hmm.
And so if my hope is that if I can show people that even if you're working with people that you struggle with, that not only can you survive this, but you can possibly, not guaranteed, but possibly change the dynamics of the relationship by just working on yourself, not staging an intervention, not talking to HR, not doing all of those things, but just working on your attitude. I think that's enormously empowering for new leaders and also for executive leaders who realize this is a different job than they thought when they got into it.
Yeah. 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 No, that's really powerful. I really like that idea. I mean, in terms of, you know, sort of making sure that you have that right attitude and approach, in what you're doing, because it does,
Yeah,
like you said, we as leaders, whether we like it or not, we have a huge impact on the people around us. So how we
massive.
approach, how we
Yeah,
approach just about everything has an impact on our
yeah,
business and our results. So
yeah,
these are things that we have to be careful and we have to be thinking about. And again, young leaders often don't get the training,
right.
to do this. And so I think
Yeah,
having a book like this is really, really powerful to help them sort of establish some routines and some practices that are going to help them be more effective in doing
yeah.
this, what I would call a very difficult job, honestly. So
It is a difficult job. It's I had it was the the president of a college was talking about, and I don't know, I looked for the research and couldn't find it, but he referred to research that he said described leadership as having some equivalent impacts as brain injury, which I don't know if that's true, but I think that it can, the stress that it can create, and the challenges it can create can be pretty tough on people.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that when people aspire to leadership, that they often, especially if they have any desire to do a good job at it, I think that they often don't calculate that part in. Like this, if you want to do a good job, then I think it says this on your website, I forget how you frame it. Leadership is about people, or it's a people. How do you frame that?
Leadership is a people business. Yeah. Yeah.
Leadership is a people business. So exactly. And I think that I'm 100% on board with that concept. And people are squirrely. They're hard to know how to work with.
Yes.
And we're one of them too. And
Yeah.
so I think learning how to deal with that side of things is not what's focused on. If you're an engineer, you get promoted because you're good at bringing in business and you're good at overseeing, projects or designing projects. You don't get promoted necessarily because you're great at building a team or dealing with issues or have vision or any of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we do it all the time. We take great individual contributors who are good at engineering, quality, sales, and we make them the manager, and they've had no proven skills at, leading a team. And so it's almost
Peter
like
principle.
It's like it's almost leadership is like an afterthought. Oh, by the way, now you're the leader. It's like, well, I have no skills in leader. No, I have not proven any ability in leadership, but yet I'm now in that role. So I think that what's good to me is that I see now more and more that leadership is becoming somewhat of a science. And like there are rules to this, and you can learn this. And I think that's what I'm excited to see. That is more and more.
And
we recognize that leadership is really important. Yeah.
But what's interesting is this has been studied for, about 100 years, like scientifically studied.
Yeah.
And workplace dynamics, management dynamics, and leadership, that's some of that is where the field of sociology got its foundings, its start.
Yeah.
And so this is a very old social science, and it's not a new concept or new application, because I think what happens is the actual like the knowledge is there, but then there's the application of it. And the people who need the application often don't have access to the knowledge or aren't aware of it. So I am trying to introduce the core concepts, scientifically, empirically based, that you need to understand in the book, in a way that's digestible, but also some of these things intuitively you might understand, like, that sounds like that makes sense, but you still don't want to do it, right? It's kind of like fitness. All right, so I need to move more, I need to eat differently, but right now I really want to do this instead, and I don't want to do that. And I think that's the struggle, is the that internal motivational side to do some of the things, to believe that I actually have to. Well, it's what I talk about with a lot of executives or owners, that what got you to where you're at, before they called me, most of the time they got there off of their own intuition. Right. Most of the time that was pretty accurate and pretty good, and they were able to outperform a lot of other people, but they're stuck. And what I say is, like, where you need to, what got you here is not what will get you there, the Marshall Goldsmith quote, but the change that you need to make is going to feel counterintuitive to you.
Yeah.
And so you're not going to want to do it. So I'm going to advise things to you that are going to feel wrong or uncomfortable, and they're the right thing for you to do. But just at the beginning, while you're getting used to it, it's not going to feel good. You just got to trust me. That's the direction you need to take. And that's tough. And the people that do it grow. And the people that are like, I don't like that, it's uncomfortable, they stay stuck.
Well, it's, and again, not to belabor the point, but it's like, in weightlifting, when you plateau, right? And so a good thing of having a weight coach is like all right, videotape your lift. Well, I've always had remote lifting coaches, but videotape your lift, and like, I'm going to assess it, and like, okay, you got to get your elbows in, you got to do, and so and then when you do the first time you make all these changes, it feels weird. It's like that's not my natural position. I don't like it. And so, and so it takes a while to sort of readjust your body to the, what you've been coached up to do. But eventually, at least my experience is that it leads to the bigger weights. It leads to getting
Right.
off that plateau finally. And so,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think there's this uncomfortable feeling like doesn't feel right. This is not what I'm used
Yeah.
to. And
And
it's
what
hard.
you just
Yeah.
said, applying that to leaders, it contains two things that most people will not do. And so if somebody wants to excel as a leader and they
Yeah.
do those two things, they'll already be head and shoulders above other people, which is, first of all, you went and got help, which you didn't need to do.
Yeah.
And you actually made yourself accountable to someone else. You sent your video in, which is awkward feeling and weird, and
Yeah.
all of the, I assume, for most people it is. So you made yourself accountable and you got help. The second thing is you actually followed the instructions.
Yeah.
Right? You did the uncomfortable thing. And so whether people are working with a coach or however they're doing it, those two things of getting help that includes accountability and then following through on what can feel uncomfortable produces growth. And almost nobody will do that. But the ones who do will start to find significant traction. And so for people that are looking at building careers or trying to understand how do I lead more effectively or lead something larger, more complicated, really those two things will take you a long way.
Oh, fantastic. I love it. Well, this has been fantastic, Christian. What final message would you like to leave with our listeners?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the theme of this conversation has really been about intentionality and just choosing that if you want to lead, it's not something that just naturally happens. If you want to lead well, you may have raw characteristics or personality types that are associated with leadership, but to really be good at it takes intentionality and practice. And so I think it's not beyond anyone, it's within anybody's reach to improve. And so my encouragement is to make that choice and to practice at it.
Fantastic. Such powerful advice. In this book, Train to Lead, I think is exactly what's needed. And I think it's great approach that you've made with this book to help people really develop their leadership skills through, thinking about from a training perspective. I love that. This has been fantastic. How can our listeners find out more about you, this new book, and all your books, really, and your services that you offer?
Yeah, well, you can find out about me at christianmuntean.com. And so it tells everything that I offer, as well as I have a blog. People can sign up for weekly leadership tips. I have tons of free resources about leadership and teams and organizational health and so on. And then the books can be found on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or anywhere. So just look for Train to Lead or look for my name, and you'll find myself and all my books.
Fantastic. We're going to put links in the show notes for all of Christian's resources, and I highly encourage you to reach out to him. If something we talked about really resonated, I really highly encourage you to reach out to him. We'll have his website here and pick up this book. I mean, if you're looking for something that's maybe different, maybe a different way of looking at leadership development in sort of from our perspective of training, get this book. It's going to give you a new way to look at leadership, and it's going to help you along your leadership journey. So I highly encourage you. Links in the show notes. I highly encourage you to pick up this book and help you become a better leader. So, Christian, thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing this book and all of your knowledge in leadership and your experience in leadership. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, John. I enjoyed being here. I enjoyed the conversation.
Well, thank you as well. Well, that is it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.